many individuals now in so many different places in the world, including India, where I started the book, to act globally, to compete, connect, and collaborate globally. And if you think about the interaction we're having now, Shekhar, the last time we did this, it was walking around a garden in Delhi.
Yes.
And
yes.
now we're able to do it for almost zero cost, basically. No jet lag on my part. And we are acting globally in partnership with your readers now as individuals. We're not a government. We're not a big global multinational. It's just Tommy Friedman sitting in Bethesda, his friend Shekhar in Delhi, and his newspaper. And yet we are acting globally. Globalization has never gotten a boost like this, and it's only going to get flatter.
So you said globalization has got a second life. Elaborate a little bit.
Well, obviously,
second life, third life, fourth life.
Sure. What I meant by that simply, obviously, we're not traveling like we used to, but then actually traveling was a pretty elite phenomenon, basically. Trade will slow down somewhat, no question. Financial flows, I think, are moving as fast as ever if you look at markets. But this kind of globalization.
Well, even in this market, if I may interrupt you, Reliance has had so much money come in from global funds, including from Facebook.
Exactly, yeah. So, but this kind of globalization of just individuals being able to connect, families connecting, newspapers, analysts connecting, all of us having this kind of global interaction seamlessly. This is only going to get better. 6 months from now, this Zoom platform will be better than ever, and I bet there'll be 10 Indian versions of it as well. So I think globalization has got a bright future if you think of it as the ability of individuals now, not just companies and countries, to act globally. And when there's a vaccine, God willing, the old version of it will come back as well.
But also, you talked about a vaccine, also the science. Two things have happened, if I may say so. One, this grand collaboration of scientists. So there's a globalization of science that we haven't seen before. And also, science has found a new respect in a world which only put value to investment bankers.
I think that's very true. Now we've all become students of epidemiology, and we have our epidemiological heroes now.
Absolutely. So science, could anybody have anticipated a terrible thing like this, bringing science back in fashion?
Well, I certainly didn't predict it. A few people did. A few people were saying we're due for a pandemic, and not urging it, obviously, but Bill Gates and others had done TED Talks. George W. Bush had given a talk saying it's only a matter of time. Shekhar, when you look back, or when I look back at the last 20 years, actually, I've lived through now 3.5 pandemics. The first was a geopolitical pandemic. It was called 9/11. Second was a financial pandemic. It was called 2008. The third was an epidemiological pandemic. It was called coronavirus. And the half of one, the one that's coming, the mother of them all, is called climate change. So there's a reason this is happening. And the reason is that we are both stressing out our geopolitical, economic, and environmental systems, and then overlaying a globalization network on top of it. And you put the two together, and you put those stresses and then a wired world together, your ability to transmit those stresses now globally is like bigger, more grease than ever before.
So you think climate change and how we are stressing the planet had something to do with this pandemic? Is there a connection?
Well, I think there's no question, at least in my mind. Of course, we still don't know how the virus emerged in Wuhan, China, and China is going to have to tell us how it emerged. But by all indications, it was like SARS, where basically what we did, we invade these ecosystems where we shouldn't be, okay? We do this as a globe. We kill the apex predators in these ecosystems and the iconic species. Then we leave these broken ecosystems to the generalized species that can survive there without their predators. They're called rats, bats, and primates. These generalized species co-evolve with these viruses. Then we go in and we hunt them for wildlife. And then we sell them in wet markets in Vietnam and China and in Central Africa. And every once in a while, one of them jumps from one of these wild animals that co-evolve with these viruses in the wild, jumps to domesticated animals. We eat them, and you end up with a zoonotic virus. That's how SARS started. There is every indication that's how this started.
So you said something I'm interested in. You said China will have to tell us. Can anybody say this about China, that China will have to do this? The Chinese do what they want to do.
Well, it depends if we play them or they play us, okay? Because, the Trump administration has been moronic when it comes to dealing with China. How should they have dealt with China on trade? This is a very important model here. What they should have done was signed the Trans-Pacific Trade Agreement, brought together 40% of global GDP under American trade rules around the Pacific without China, then gone to India and Europe and say, you guys all have trade issues with China too, you join with us, then called the Chinese to a negotiation where it would be the world versus China on the right trade rules, okay? Now, if that were the equation, then all the reformers inside China, and there are many of them, would have been on our side. Instead, Trump said, I'm going to go it alone against China. It's going to be me against Xi over who's got the biggest tariff. I'm going to go to trade war with Europe at the same time, and Canada, and Mexico, and South Korea. I'm going to make it me versus Xi. And what that does is trigger all the nationalists in China to rally around their own president. It was just really, really stupid. Now, what I fear, Shekhar, is he's going to do the same on Wuhan virus. Rather than coming to India and Europe and the WHO and say, make it all of us against China on having an independent inquiry about where this came from, he's going to make it America against China, trigger all the nationalists there, and then basically we'll have China split the rest of the world, and they'll get away without having a rigorous investigation.
So is he poorly advised, or he doesn't listen to advice?
Trump is a deeply ignorant man. He's ignorant, he's arrogant, he has a second-rate, actually a third-rate team around him. He doesn't listen, he doesn't learn, and I just hope we can survive his presidency, and God forbid we have 4 more years.
You see, what are the odds you put on a re-election?
Too soon to tell. I just wouldn't make any guess. The next 6 months are going to be wild.
So, Tom, science and economics. Economics has never needed science as much as it does right now. Right? Science is the Pentagon that needs to act to save the world right now. So how do you see this complex equation evolving? Because so far, people who made the money, people who played with money, they didn't take science so seriously. They thought the most boring nerds in the class went to science.
Excuse me, Shekhar. So let me share with you how I look at this problem globally from 30,000 feet, and that will explain my answer to your very good question. My daughter, Natalie Shekhar, is the executive producer of All Things Considered Weekend Edition on National Public Radio. It's on Saturday and Sunday, so I never miss a show. And on Easter Sunday, they had a very special show. It was, they had pastors in churches all over America, and they took excerpts from their Sunday Easter sermons. And the last one was Michael Elliott. He's the pastor at National Cathedral here in Washington. And he ended his Easter sermon by singing, "He's got the whole In his hands, he's got the whole wide world. In his hands, he's got the whole world. In his hands, he's got the whole world in his hands. Now, Shekhar, just substitute he for she, Mother Nature. And she got the whole world in her hands. We as a species, because the last time this happened was 1918, have never experienced, no member of our generation have ever experienced that feeling that she got the whole world in her hands. Now, what is Mother Nature? Mother Nature is just chemistry, biology, and physics. That's all she is. You cannot talk her up. You cannot talk her down. You can't say, Mother Nature, we're having a recession. Would you take a few months off? No, she's going to do whatever chemistry, biology, and physics dictate. And she always bats last, to put it in cricket terms, and she always bats 1,000. Do not.
Only people in the world who understand a little bit of cricket are you Americans.
Do not mess with Mother Nature, okay? So let's start with the unique nature of this challenge. People have used often the terms of war, that we're at war with Mother Nature. No, Shekhar. You never are at war with Mother Nature. In war, we could out-mobilize and out-strategize the Nazis and the Japanese to win World War II. We could out-innovate and outspend the Soviet Union to win the Cold War. You can do neither with Mother Nature. What this pandemic is are one of her many fastballs, to put it in American baseball term, one of the many things she throws at us as a species to test who is the fittest, who should survive and get their DNA into the next generation. That's what her heat waves and storms and floods and viruses, that's what they are. And who does she reward when she throws these threats at us? She rewards not the strongest. She rewards not the smartest. She only rewards the most adaptive. Which species of plant, animal, humans can adapt the best using chemistry, biology, and physics? Because those are her only currencies, okay? So if your currency is ideology, she will hurt you or someone you love. If your currency is politics, she will hurt you or someone you love. If your currency is your next election campaign, she will hurt you or someone you love. She rewards only one thing: who will adapt using chemistry, biology, and physics the best. And she always bats last, and she always bats perfectly. So that is the overall challenge we face. Now, the problem with Trump is he knows nothing about the natural world, okay? He's a market guy. He only values things that are in money or markets. So early on in this crisis, when the market was still going up, no matter what he was doing, he thought he was winning against Mother Nature. When the market went up one day early in March at a record level, he actually took a screenshot of it and autographed it and sent it to Lou Dobbs on Fox News. And that knucklehead showed it on the evening news. While Trump was doing all that, Shekhar, Mother Nature was silently, invisibly, exponentially, inexorably, and mercilessly spreading coronavirus throughout our country. And she doesn't, like the market, open at 9:30, close at 4, and take Saturday and Sunday off, okay? So if you don't respect her, if you are not completely coordinated in how you respond to her, because her viruses are evolved to find any crack in your armor, okay? And if you are not about chemistry, biology, and physics, then she will hurt you or someone you love. And that is what we are slowly learning in the United States. So Americans, even though Trump has said, go out, go to work, I lift the lockdown, 2/3 are staying home because they're listening to Dr. Fauci, the scientists and the epidemiologists who understand chemistry, biology, and physics, not the politicians. Some are listening to the politicians, but many are now listening to the scientists. They get the difference.
So Dr. Fauci has become quite a star all over the world, including in India. What's this thing about Trump, that someone like Fauci has survived in his White House? I think he's a prime candidate for a Trump firing.
Well, A, give it time. B, Trump retweeted someone calling for him being fired. Trump retweeted that, just a little jab at him. And
Right.
Just give it time, Shekhar. Nobody emerges from Trump's orbit larger than they came in. They only emerge smaller or more sullied or more harmed.
So I think the best thing that can happen to you in the Trump orbit is that he fires you. So at least you got your
He has attacked me on Twitter, so I feel pretty protected.
Yeah, so that's a box to check. I was fired by Trump, or I was attacked by Trump. That's it. That's a good one to do. Now,
Yeah.
I have a question for John Elliott, who used to be the Financial Times bureau chief in Delhi, also now runs Asia Sentinel and a blog called Riding the Elephant. So he said, trick question. In what order would you list these presidents or prime ministers' positive contribution? Repeat, positive contribution to their countries. Xi Jinping, Narendra Modi, Boris Johnson, Donald Trump, and why? Xi Jinping first.
So, look, she missed this. He failed to understand what was happening in Wuhan and failed to respond both domestically and globally with the speed he should have and with the transparency he should have. But after a few weeks, he recovered and then used the Chinese system to great effect at home to curtail the spread of the virus. That's how I would rate Xi Jinping. Right now, though, I think he is courting trouble by trying to bully the world into not demanding a transparent investigation into where the virus came from. That would be my read on him.
Right. Narendra Modi?
You know, I'm far away from India, but it strikes me that I've not followed it closely. I'm not trying to hide from your question, Shekhar. I'm not, but I haven't followed it closely. But it strikes me that he was pretty quick to order a national lockdown. Not easy in a country like India, where so many people live in very dense conditions and have such a high poverty rate in rural areas, where just washing your hands in clean water regularly, let alone social distancing, is not easy. But seems to me Modi has been more effective than not. And the virus has not spread in India at the speed, scope, and scale I would have expected. Now, that may be for epidemiological reasons, climate reasons, latitudinal reasons, I don't know. But for now, you know, I think Modi deserves a decent grade.
Okay. Boris Johnson?
Boris Johnson was, unfortunately, I think, freaked out unnecessarily by the Imperial College epidemiological study by Neil Ferguson, which it predicted that if the UK adopted a herd immunity approach, as Sweden had, which is where Boris Johnson and his advisors actually wanted to go, which sort of partial lockdown, letting the most healthy stay out and keep running businesses and moving on, he was knocked off that impulse, has gone for the sort of conventional broad lockdown, and the UK is suffering. It's suffering economically and epidemiologically at the same time. I don't think they're happy, particularly with where they are, from what I've read.
But what has he done right? Besides checking the box about getting infected.
Yeah, I think he's taken the virus seriously, and they did a really stringent lockdown. But again, everyone who's done a lockdown, all that did was spread out the virus, flatten it rather than getting an immediate spike so your hospital system isn't overwhelmed. You aren't really making any headway in terms of gaining immunity to it, either through a vaccine or naturally.
Yeah. And Donald Trump, something positive that he's done. Now, that is a trick question.
Well, he will tell you the most positive thing he did was stop incoming flights of Chinese from China, early on. And I would give him credit for that. At the time, probably wasn't such an easy call. I think he should get credit for that. Of course, we didn't stop Americans coming from China. So 40,000 more people came from China after we stopped Chinese, but we couldn't do that, of course. So that I think is his biggest achievement.
So I have a question from Uday Kotak, who's one of India's most prominent bankers and a global star from corporate India, who says that you've been talking about life, BC and AC, that is before Corona and after Corona. So explain that a little bit.
This is a world-shaking event, Shekhar. Trends that were apparent are now being vastly accelerated after Corona. Whether it's what you and I are doing now, which we've never done before, but which we will do again in the future, I am promising you, okay? Financial trends in terms of the collapse of traditional retail, financial educational trends in terms of e-learning, all of these trends that were there BC before Corona seem to be vastly accelerated by Corona and will create a new world in all of these areas of finance, education, journalism after Corona that I don't think will go away. Now that I know, Shekhar, you and I can have this, I almost feel like I'm sitting across from you like I used to do. It's about 85% as good. It's not 100% as good. I'm missing the serendipity of talking to your staff and taking the cab with Rolly to see you at your office in Mumbai, or I'm missing that, okay? But in terms of the core quality of our interaction, Shekhar, I feel like we're sitting across the desk from each other. And I'm not jet lagged. I'm not asking for another coffee because I'm falling asleep because I just flew in this morning from Washington, D.C. And now that I know that I can do this, I will be doing it a lot in the future.
So will companies have smaller offices? They'll employ fewer people? Will it have consequences like that?
I have no doubt about it. I've talked to corporate leaders already who have their people working at home, and they're seeing, excuse me, how their people like it more. It's cheaper. It's more efficient. The New York Times has been closed since the first week in March. We announced we're not opening our offices again until September 8th. Let's see, it's May 11th. And we now have probably have gained 1 million more online subscribers. We have over 6 million online subscribers now. You think we're going back to the old way? There's not a chance.
In fact, I was watching on CNN, reliable sources, some of the data coming up from New York Times person.
It's amazing.
Advertising may be down, but subscriptions, and if I may tell you, in the last 2 months, we have tripled our readership.
Fantastic.
Gone up 3 times.
Fantastic. How many readers, can I ask, the online readers does ThePrint have?
Right now, last month we had 20 million unique visitors.
Really? That's fantastic.
We are 4 months from turning 3.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
And even our YouTube page is now adding 3,000 subscribers a day. We are sitting at about 850,000 now and going up.
Fantastic.
So I have, again, another corporate leader from India, very well respected, Deepak Parekh. And the question he came up with was, he said, countries now have to spend, governments have to spend to revive their economies. But many countries, say countries like India, are now also frightened by rating agencies. Post 2008, there were questions about how much you could trust rating agencies. Today, do you think that some of these global pressure points have to ease, and rating agencies and the rest also have to see that the countries that spend to revive their economies have to be treated differently?
I hope they will, Shekhar, but there's the rating agencies and there's the market. And the market will do its own math in terms of your currency, its value, and its debasement. And I think this is going to be a particularly excruciating question for developing countries that don't have the ability that we have to have the Treasury issue bonds, have the Fed buy them, and be able to put a cushion under us. And I'm really worried about this. I don't know enough economics to be able to give any kind of authoritative answer to that question, Shekhar. I will just say that I fear a lot of people will be debasing their currencies globally, just printing money to necessarily save their workers and their most vulnerable, and that we will see a spike in gold.
Spike in gold.
Yeah.
Okay. I have Ambassador K.V. Rajan, the former Indian ambassador, who now runs Ambassadors Economic Forum. Will there be a redrawing of global supply chains to reduce dependence on China? And can that lead to a major shift towards India? That's a question everybody wants. In India, we declare victory too soon. We know it's a problem. But should we start looking at this as an opportunity?
Well, be very careful, because China, using its own system, is already back at work. They reopened Disney China today.
Absolutely. With sanitizers and masks.
Think about that. They're going back to Disney World in China, and you can't get near Disney World today in Orlando.
Right.
All right. And so what's happened is China's actually gotten its supply chains back up, and it looks now like an even more reliable partner, okay, for a manufacturer, because they've been able to work their way through a pandemic. So I'd be very, very careful about predicting that everyone's going to see that they don't need to depend on China anymore. It may be in 6 months just the opposite. They're even more dependent on China because we're still in a roiling mess. And so if India has hopes of supplanting China in some markets in terms of supply chain, it's going to really have to get its act together right now in order to do that. Now, that said, on issues of mass, of basic raw materials for medicines, there will be, I'm sure, a relook at that question. People will want to bring some of those critical supply chains back home, no matter what the cost. But that will affect India, which is a big global supplier of so many basic medicines and components for vaccines and medicines. So I would be very careful about making any predictions that China's finished and this is America or India's moment. We all have to perform now, and the world is watching.
And the Chinese, as you said, are already going to Disney.
They're already going to Disney World. Think about that.
They opened it today, in fact. We just ran a story from Bloomberg. So, Tom, China, America. A lot of us had thought that America was going backwards and backwards, and China was rising in the world. Also, China is more interventionist in different ways, good ways, bad ways, etc. And America was becoming more isolationist. What kind of America do you see emerging out of this, irrespective of who wins?
Well, Shekhar, what this moment has revealed is something I wrote about in 2011 with my friend Michael Mandelbaum, a book that was about America called That Used to Be Us.
Yes.
How America lost its way in the world it invented and how we can come back. So it's been clear to me for a decade that we aren't who we think we are. We're like someone who says we're exceptional. Shekhar, did I tell you we're exceptional? Let me show you the degree, honorary degree on my wall. It says America is exceptional. But being exceptional is not like an honorary degree on your wall. Being exceptional is something you have to earn and re-earn and prove and reprove every day. But we got in the habit of me taking you into my library, Shekhar, and showing you my exceptional degree and thinking that was enough. We aren't who we think we are. We're actually a really disorganized state who did the riskiest thing we've ever done in our history, elected a fraud, a huckster, and an ignoramus as our president. We thought we were going to get lucky and get through the 4 years despite having elected him okay. And instead, we got the worst crisis in a century and maybe in our history while this guy is president. And so I am very worried. The biggest sentiment I find from my friends around the world is pity. Pity. I remember people hating America. I remember people feeling bullied by America. I remember people resenting America, but I never remember people pitying America.
You see the governments learning a lesson from this, because suddenly governments realize that now World Bank, IMF, in fact, Modi used that line in his first speech while announcing the lockdown. He said that every country is on its own now, because no country will come and help you. So what lessons do you think will the countries or governments learn? Will they become more control freak? For example, running of businesses, which is a problem in India. And I have Anil Agrawal, who's chairman of Vedanta, which is a big Indian conglomerate, who's asked this question, that will this get governments to become more tempted to get involved in businesses or be more interventionist at domestic levels? Or will it teach them to let their economies grow and reduce their footprints from business, except for particularly countries like India, where government still does a lot of business?
Well, Shekhar, I've always felt the secret to America's sauce, okay, was our public-private partnership. The fact that government created a kind of enabling infrastructure, and then that the market, the free market and business launch off of that. And I think that that's the successful model. But that model was based on governments that constantly invested in what I called the big five: infrastructure, ports, airports, railroad, telecom, okay? Education, the best schools, okay? K-12 universities, etc. The most government-funded research to push out the boundaries of science so our business could pluck off the flowers and turn them into great new companies called Intel and Google and Microsoft. The most immigration, so we could get all the smartest brains in India to come to America and run Google and Microsoft and Adobe and Workday. I can go down the list of American companies now run by Indian Americans. Thank you, India, for educating these people and then sending them to America. And then lastly, having the best rules to incentivize investment and prevent recklessness, okay? Incentivize risk-taking and prevent recklessness. Those were our big five. Those were how we got where we got. And every president nurtured them, going back to Lincoln, when he built the National Railroad, started the Morrill Act of state universities. We've gotten away from investing in those big five. And that's government's role at a minimum. And then let business play off that platform. I can't speak, I don't know India well enough what's going on there now, but I can tell you America has gotten away from that.
That rule of five is a good one for governments. That's essentially what the government should be doing.
Yes.
Invest in physical infrastructure, invest in education, invest in research, and what are the other two?
Invest in immigration, attracting the best global talent, whether it's your own or someone else's. And lastly, investing in the right rules to incentivize risk-taking and prevent recklessness.
Absolutely. In fact, when we see India's ease of business ratings, the one area where India does very badly,
always has,
is enforcement of contracts.
Yep, always has. Real problem.
Because rules are not followed.
Yes.
I have now Rajesh Bhuttani. Well, I mean, we'll pass it. We discussed it. China has been pushing its neighbors. We've seen the Chinese do some things with the Japanese in Senkaku area. And last couple of weeks, we've also had Chinese troops walk into sort of contested areas, push Indian soldiers around, something that we haven't seen for some time. These things don't happen by coincidence in China, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there is always a temptation. I'm not speaking about the specifics. I don't know, honestly, Shekhar, but there's always the temptation when you have internal stress to deflect attention by creating external enemies. And Trump has been doing that with Xi. Xi has been doing that with Trump. What you're telling me suggests maybe that's going on with India as well. That's the way to rally people to the flag and deflect their attention.
Going on with India or with China?
Pardon me?
This is going on with India or with China?
I'm saying with China.
China.
Yeah.
Yes. So this is a little bit of thing saying that.
Yes, that's right out of the old standard playbook. I mean, you have problems at home, externalize them by finding a foreign enemy everyone can rally around rather than criticizing you.
So Narendra Modi has invested a lot of equity in Donald Trump. My friend Trump, my friend Narendra, lots of hugs. And there is a feeling that Donald Trump likes Modi and vice versa, and Donald Trump can deliver a lot that India needs. You think Narendra Modi has calculated right or wrong?
I totally understand what Prime Minister Modi is doing. There's only one American president at a time. This is the president we have. This president can pass me goodies that are important for India, India's people, its economy, its geopolitics. I'm good, and he judges everyone on how nice they are to him personally. I understand what the prime minister is doing. I would be doing the same myself. There's no interest in creating a fight with Trump. He's only going to be there, God willing, 4 years. But in those 4 years, it's the job of whoever leads India. And if it were the Congress Party, I would guess they would be doing the same thing, of not picking a fight with this mercurial character, but rather, trying to get the most out of him and protect yourself from the worst.
Could America survive 4 more years of Trump?
America will not survive as we've known it with 4 more years. Our institutions will not hold, Shekhar. It will be a disaster.
And if that happens in America, this will have a knock-on effect on the rest of the world.
The America you knew it will no longer be there.
Because, if the strong man model is on test, because if you see Trump, Abe, Xi Jinping, Narendra Modi, Erdogan, Netanyahu, Orban, Bolsonaro, this whole world is now being run by alpha males.
Yes.
And a lot of people think this model works. You see this model coming unstuck, or do you see this model sustaining itself for some more time? Because the cocktail is the same. It's nationalism, it is protectionism, it is me, the He-Man.
Well, I would just, speaking generally, Shekhar, I would say that if you were to nominate the leader who has managed this crisis the best across the whole world, it's actually the alpha female, Chancellor Merkel of Germany. It's really Chancellor Merkel who has handled this the best. So I think it's way too soon to tell, Shekhar, whether this model of majoritarian, leaders, elected leaders who behave very autocratically, whether this is the future, whether this is a phase, I don't know, but how they handle this crisis will have a big influence on that. Of that, I'm sure.
So I have Shailja Bajpayee with my colleague. She says, you clearly want to see Joe Biden as the next president after November 2020, but in TV interviews, he's often seemed asleep at the wheel. Do you really think he can beat Trump?
I worry whether he can beat Trump. Yeah, Trump is an amazing political animal. We haven't seen anything like him, and I have great respect for his political skills. Biden is old and he shows it, but he also has the thing that people are looking for a lot now, in contrast to Trump. That's decency, warmth, the ability to connect at the human level. So Biden has assets. He's not there by accident, but he also has some obvious weaknesses, and that's just his physical stamina now.
But you would think that Democrats were right in preferring him over Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren.
I certainly did. I supported him over the two, although I actually was a Bloomberg supporter. I thought Democrats would have been best with Bloomberg as their candidate, but he wasn't the man of this time. It just, too many people were looking for something different, I'm afraid.
And why did you prefer him over the other two, Sanders and Elizabeth?
I think two reasons, Shekhar. One is that when you look at substance, the ability actually to lead, Bloomberg's many years of running the biggest city in America very successfully around issues of infrastructure, education, economics. He really knew these issues, number one. Number two, as I wrote about him, he is a rattlesnake with a heart of gold, okay? That is, he's really tough. And to go up against Donald Trump.
A rattlesnake with a heart of gold, I'll steal it from you.
Yeah, please. And so to go up against...
I'll change the species of the snake, because in India, we don't know rattlesnakes so well.
He's a cobra.
The cranes and the vipers and the cobras.
He's a cobra with a heart of gold. And to go up against Donald Trump, you need the fangs of a cobra. You know what I mean? But to win America, you need a heart of gold. And Trump and Bloomberg has a heart of gold, okay, in terms of helping people, both by how he governed and through his philanthropy. So I thought he had a machine, Shekhar, that was built to last. Remember, he runs, maybe, other than Google, the biggest data science company in the world. So he knows how to use the internet, in one of the biggest data science companies in the world, surely. And so I thought he had a machine that could really take on Trump, and you're going to need a machine. But for whatever reasons, a billionaire running now in the current climate, it was just very hard.
And what was the flaw with the other two, with Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren? Because they seem to excite the young a lot more. Sanders was an avowed democratic socialist, and about a third of the Democratic Party believes in something called democratic socialism. That means about a sixth of the whole country believes in it. So it was never going to scale. It was never going to scale. And fortunately, a group of African-American women in South Carolina basically saved the party by saying, forget all that stuff, okay? Biden's the guy, we're voting for Biden, you know what I mean? And you know why they did that, Shekhar? Is very interesting. There was incredible wisdom. I think of these African-American women in a choir in a church down in South Carolina. And there was such wisdom there. They looked at the candidates, they looked at the challenge, and they said, there's just one thing we need, someone to beat Donald Trump. And they did the math and calculated who was the best to do that, and they pulled the lever for Joe Biden. And they weren't voting on race, they weren't voting on women. They understood the biggest issue in the country is to prevent 4 more years of Donald Trump. We owe them a huge debt for their wisdom up there in the choir section. In cricket, we'd say choosing the right bowler for the right batsman.
Exactly.
So
totally.
Last question, we can't hold you forever. Last question is from our political editor, DK Singh, who says in early 2014, you said Indian economy was like a superhighway. About 4 years later, in November 2017, you said, if India were a stock, I'd buy it. Would you still buy it in May 2020?
Yeah, I said India was a superhighway, though, but where the sidewalks weren't finished, the lines in the highway weren't drawn, and half the street lamps were out, okay? I said it smooths out into a superhighway down the road. That's what I hope. So just to get accurate what I said. I'm a huge, I still, Shekhar, am a sucker for India. I think a country with 1.3 billion people speaking 100 different languages, having free and fair elections every 4 years is a miracle. And if India were like Syria today, the whole world would be a different place. So Indian pluralism and innate democracy, I believe, is a blessing for the world. It must cherish that, it must revere it, and it must preserve it. Because India's pluralism and basic democratic impulses is vital for India's success and is vital for the world's success. It must respect it, cherish it, and preserve it for India's sake and the world's sake.
And do you see any dangers there?
I see some dangers lately. I'd be lying if I said I didn't. I worry about some of these trends. I'm not close to them. I'm not studying them closely, but I know what I read in the paper. And I'm just going to repeat, India's pluralism and its democracy is the underlying keys to all its success. And it's so important for India and the world. It must cherish them and preserve them.
Well, thank you very much, Tom. We can go on talking as we often do, but I know you are busier working from home than from outside. So thank you very much. Also, before I let you go away, I have to acknowledge this with so many people watching, that if the print has become a reality, you've been greatly responsible for giving me the impetus to do this.
I really appreciate
and
that.
So many of the ideas that we shared, that you shared with me, we implemented, and one that you mentioned several times, we are putting into effect next week, and that is the campus op-ed idea.
Yes.
So next week when it rolls out, I'll send you a link. Please do let me know what you think.
That's great, Joe. Best of luck.
And all the very best to your family.
Thanks, Shekhar. You too. You take care. Bye to everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much.